My name is Jeff Thies, and it's a real pleasure to have this opportunity for discussion with Jennifer Leitsch, the Vice President of Corporate Responsibility for CBRE. Our conversation today is part of the Global Business Insights video series for the Center for International Business Education. And our focus will really be on CBRE. Really, our conversation will have three kind of categories in it, if you will. The first is Jennifer's going to share a bit about CBRE, the business, its dimensions and divisions, its global footprint. And then she will speak specifically about the approach that CBRE has to corporate responsibility and the work of corporate responsibility within CBRE. And then we'll ask her some questions about kind of how she got to where she got and her career path and development that led to the role that she has right now. I'm a clinical assistant professor and also director of the Institute for Business Ethics and Sustainability. And many of those joining this presentation today are taking a class called Business Ethics and Sustainability. And the focus on corporate responsibility, corporate social responsibility, and the process of designing it and implementing it and measuring it is a key part of what we're looking at in the class. So we're really excited to have Jennifer join us. So what we will do is have a conversation. Really, I'll ask Jennifer some questions and she will reflect on her experience and her role with us. And then after that, then I'll invite it to broad question and answer where all of you who are logged in can also ask Jennifer any question. And like I said, we've got a hard stop at 1, and we just really look forward to the opportunity of this conversation. So Jennifer, thank you so much for being with us today. It's a great pleasure and a great honor. And so I wonder if you could just talk first about CBRE, kind of describe it for those who may not be familiar with it and its kind of reach and footprint.
Sure. Thank you so much, Jeff, for the invitation to be here. Thank you for the correct pronunciation of my last name. It's a challenging one, and I certainly appreciate those who ask in advance. So as you noted, I am with CBRE. I've been here for about 6 years. And CBRE is the world's largest commercial real estate services and investment firm. That's a mouthful, right? So what does that actually mean? So we provide services to owners and occupiers of commercial real estate. So if you are interested in buying or selling commercial real estate, and that could be an office building, it could be a warehouse or distribution center, it could be a multifamily apartment building, it could be a retail establishment, it could be land. If you're interested in buying or selling those types of properties, we can help you with that. If you're interested in leasing those types of properties, we can help you with that. If you're interested in investing in commercial real estate, in developing or actually having a project built, a commercial real estate project built, we do all of those things. If you are trying to figure out how much is my building worth, how much could I potentially sell it for, given the market that I'm in and the economy, we can help you with all of those things. And we do that for clients large and small. We are a global company, as Jeff noted. So we are operating in more than 100 countries around the world, and we have more than 100,000 employees. I mean, that's still hard for me to get my head around, even years into being in the business. That's the size of a city, right? Just one company providing these types of services to clients around the world. And so again, we operate in kind of all major geographies. We do operate primarily in urban areas, in about 500 offices across those geographies. Our clients, again, as I mentioned, are large and small. We serve more than 90% of the Fortune 100, so the 100 largest companies, here in the US. And we also serve companies and organizations all the way down to, maybe a local, salon or restaurant who's looking for a new location for their business. So we could be working with every major brand, most major brands probably familiar with, as well as smaller companies. Again, really anyone who needs support with their commercial real estate. I guess the other major part of our business that I didn't mention is the outsourcing part of our business. So I talked about if you're wanting to buy or sell or lease commercial real estate, But say you own commercial real estate properties, and you need somebody to actually manage that on a day-to-day basis. You need somebody to collect the rent from the tenants, to make sure the landscaping gets taken care of, that the windows get washed, that the restrooms get cleaned, that there's security, there's somebody at the concierge desk, somebody in the mail room, right? Somebody running the cafeteria. We provide all of those outsourcing types of activities for occupiers and owners of commercial real estate as well. So I hopefully, if you knew nothing about commercial real estate, maybe you have a little bit better understanding now of the types of services that we offer. Does that help, Jeff?
Yeah, that's very helpful. I wonder if you could, is there any kind of concentration in that broad array of services? Do you find a concentration by country, a concentration by kind of service sector, or just kind of how that broad scope might kind of slice and dice, if you will?
Yeah, exactly. We do operate, in the Americas, in EMEA, right? So Europe, Middle East, and Africa, and in Asia Pacific. So pretty much in all major geographies. Office, real estate properties are probably our largest area of focus for the business. But again, we operate, and provide services to all different types of commercial real estate. So office probably being the primary type, but certainly have our hands in all different types of commercial real estate. And in terms of types of clients, it's all over the map. I mean, some of the clients that are really maybe the more exciting ones these days are clients like life sciences clients, right? Or, technology clients. They have really different needs than maybe other types of clients, right? In terms of, what they're doing in that real estate versus, maybe someone who's, using it as a retail storefront, for example. So again, it's hard to kind of answer the question because we operate pretty much everywhere and with pretty much everyone.
Right, but having a client that runs a world-class research lab in their footprint is very different than one that runs a restaurant, for example. That's what
Exactly. Exactly. And we have people who specialize obviously in different client types in different geographies. Absolutely.
And just maybe for the sake of the students, the questions of power and just all of the design around the real estate itself, is that a place that CBRE is involved in?
So CBRE does have a subsidiary called Trammell Crow Company. If you are in Dallas or from Dallas, you might be familiar with Trammell Crow Company. It is one of the largest developers of commercial real estate in the United States. So if you're looking to build a property, we typically work with people who have an idea of what they want, and then we will build it to their specifications. We can certainly provide advice and guidance. We can build it to be a green building, for example, if that's something that the client is interested in. And that business is actually starting to expand as well. That business just acquired a small company in London about a year ago that focuses on building multifamily or apartment types of housing. So yes, we can definitely help with that. We also do, help clients with building out a space. So if you, just rented a space in an office building, for example, you might walk in and there might not be any walls other than the 4 walls on the outside. How do you actually divide up that space and design it to be a space that is, interesting to be in, that's, helps your employees be more productive, that's a healthy type of workspace. So we do that type of project management to build out a space as well.
Thank you. And maybe if we could shift a bit to your role and specifically corporate responsibility, what is corporate responsibility for CBRE, and how does it see it, and what's its place within the overall business strategy and structure?
Yeah, absolutely. So when we think about corporate responsibility, we think about being, doing business in an ethical and responsible way, right? And that includes kind of all aspects of environmental sustainability and social responsibility. It has to do with the way we govern the organization as well. Some people, people use different terms to describe some of the same things. I know, Jeff, you were saying corporate responsibility and you kind of slipped in maybe corporate social responsibility. Some people also say sustainability or corporate citizenship or even ESG. So if you haven't heard that acronym, it stands for environmental social governance. But really it's thinking about all of those things that have to do with how the company does business, right? And that really, infiltrates all parts of the business, all parts of our operations. And so my team really looks at what the company is doing across all of those dimensions. And those dimensions could be things like environmental sustainability, community involvement and corporate philanthropy, workplace safety and well-being, people and culture, diversity and inclusion, some of those types of things, ethics and compliance, corporate governance, responsible procurement. So kind of all those things maybe fall under the umbrella of corporate responsibility. My team specifically manages a couple of those areas directly, and then we try to influence and then report on all of those areas. So in terms of the reporting side of things, we put together a report each year called our Corporate Responsibility Report that covers all those areas I just described. It talks about what the company is currently doing in terms of our programs and policies. It talks about our goals and where we're going with those things. So my team needs to know what the company's doing in all of our regions around the world and all of our business lines and all of those areas so that we can communicate that information in this report, which is then read by our investors. We are a publicly traded company, so our investors care about this information, right? They want to be investing in a company that's going to grow over time, that's paying attention to these things that could potentially be risks for the company, right? And that we have our act together. Prospective employees and current employees read this report. They want to work for a company that cares about the same things that they care about. They want to know that this is a responsible business. Clients care about this information. They want to make sure that if they're hiring us to work with them, that, they can trust us, that we're a responsible business, that we align with their values, right? So doing this report each year and responding to all kinds of questions we get throughout the year from all of those stakeholders is a really big piece of my job and my team's responsibilities. And then my team directly manages a couple of those areas ourselves. So my team is directly responsible for environmental sustainability. So that means my team calculates the company's carbon footprint each year. We set goals to reduce that footprint and we work to get the company to achieve those goals. We look at things like climate change and climate risk. And what does that mean to the company? What might happen in terms of, the way the world is moving with regard to climate change that could potentially pose risks to the company. And those could be risks like, things you might think of like sea level rise or increased severity of storms. Or it could also be things like, reputational risk or changes in the marketplace or customers saying, are you keeping up with these things? It could be regulatory risk, right? If we're being faced with new laws and regulations that we have to follow in various countries where we operate around the world because they're going in a certain direction because climate change is happening. So my team focuses on all of those environmental sustainability types of activities. And then we also focus on our communities and giving activities. It includes our charitable giving and employee volunteering programs, which again kind of supplement some of the other things that we do, in terms of the environment and in terms of diversity, equity, and inclusion, et cetera. And so again, we directly manage a couple of those things on my team, but we know what the company's doing across the business in all of those other areas. And we work to influence the business in those other areas, right? So, I don't run the people or, sometimes called the human resources team. I don't run the procurement team. I don't run the corporate I don't run the compliance team or the ethics team. But I have an understanding of what they're doing. I have an understanding of what our stakeholders are expecting us to be doing in those areas. And I work to try to influence those people and those teams across the business to help the company continue to move in the right direction. And so when you're talking about business strategy, really a lot of these things are really, again, incorporated throughout the business. And we can't have a successful business if we don't operate with integrity and operate in an ethical manner, right? That's kind of very, very core to who we are as a company. That's one of our core values actually is integrity. And I know companies say, oh, we have core values, right? But CBRE, we really do know and live our values. They're very simple. They're very easy to remember. They make an acronym called RISE. And it's respect, integrity, service, and excellence. And that's really kind of very fundamental to who we are. And without, kind of having that as our foundation, we wouldn't be who we are as a company. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of an idea of when I say corporate responsibility, how we define that here and the types of that I'm directly responsible for.
Yeah, that's really helpful. Thank you. I wonder, and I think you've kind of described it, but I just want to label it for the benefit of everybody. Sometimes people, at LMU will sometimes say, yeah, those are all, I mean, this can be a bias. I don't want to say this is an attitude at the university, so let me characterize, but it can be like, this is all a bunch of nice stuff, but really business is about money, thank you. And it is this idea of profit really as primary, and really that's really what business is about. And then you'll hear people say it's not a contrast between profit and purpose, but it's profit through purpose, that there's a relationship between profit and really how a business understands its responsibilities and what it's trying to achieve. And so I wonder if you could just share a little bit about your perspective, or CBRE's perspective, about that kind of almost foundational question.
Yeah, I would say that, the prevailing thought 20 or 10 or maybe even 5 years ago amongst many people was that, businesses are in business to make money, right? And of course, right, if we aren't profitable, if we aren't making money, we don't have a business, right?
Right.
Of course, we have to make money, right? But if we aren't doing it in a responsible way, then we don't have a business either. So we really do, consider our corporate responsibility initiatives and consider the needs of all of our stakeholders when we're making business decisions. Again, we are publicly traded, so we have investors, we have shareholders who buy our stock. They expect that stock to grow in value over time, and they want to make money. And how do we do that? Well, of course, we do that through our core business services and business functions. But if we aren't doing that in a responsible way, we maybe will be hit with fines, right? That could be detrimental to the business. We could not be able to attract and retain top talent. That could be detrimental to the business, right? If we're doing things that are, detrimental to the environment, right? That could be detrimental to the company's reputation, as well as potentially, legal ramifications. So the company, about a year and a half ago, signed on to a big statement that was made by a number of leading CEOs in the United States. That group of leading CEOs is called the Business Roundtable. And they put out a statement called the Statement on the Purpose of a Corporation. And literally up until that point in August of 2019, the Business Roundtable and other entities were saying, the purpose of a corporation is to make money, right? Mm-hmm. Now we're saying the purpose of a corporation is to, yes, obviously we need to grow, and but we need to have a purpose, right? We need to exist to something other than just to make money. And we need to exist to benefit the needs of all of our stakeholders, not just our shareholders, our investors, but all of our stakeholders, our clients, our employees, our communities, the environment. And that was a really big deal. Again, you were probably saying that's common sense. And to some of us, I think that is kind of common sense, right? That's how I've been kind of, working in the more than a decade now in this career path, specifically focused on these things, right? That companies need to do all these other things in order to be successful, right? They can't just be making money and not care about any of their stakeholders. But this was a really big shift in the mindset of many people. And so, yeah, I would absolutely say that, again, we have to exist as a business, but we can't exist as a business if we don't do things in the right way.
Well, thank you so much. That shift from shareholder capitalism to, shareholder capitalism to stakeholder capitalism, like you said, through that Business Roundtable statement. Where do you see, and how do you see this related to the global environment within which CBRE does business? Maybe you could reflect on the Global Compact as one expression of that, but also, is this a kind of, how do you implement this on a global basis, and does it bring a competitive advantage? Is it a challenging kind of environment? How do you think about this from a global perspective?
Yeah, in a company this large, right, it can be very challenging to implement some of these initiatives consistently on a global scale. And certainly there are differences in our various regions, right? You think about governments, for example, right? Here in the United States, for the last 4 years, the administration has not put a focus on the environment, right? They actually withdrew the company from the Paris Climate Agreement. Now look at every one of those other 99 countries where we operate. Every one of those countries is still a signatory to the Paris Climate Agreement, right? So when people were saying to us things like, oh, well, the US government doesn't really care about the environment anymore. Why is CBRE, still doing these things? We don't just operate here in the US. We operate in all these countries around the world. And our clients do too. Again, our clients, large and small, but we have clients again in all these different countries. And so they're trying to comply with whatever the regulations are in their countries. And their regulations are saying we need to limit global greenhouse gas emissions. So it absolutely is, something to think about when we're in a global company, is not just our local context and getting kind of caught up in what I'm hearing on the news every day, being a citizen of the United States, but being, a citizen of the world, right? And understanding what's happening in the broader world, and what is our part, what is the place that, what's the part that we play in the world, given who we are. Again, we are the world's largest company of our kind. And if we do things right, it can really matter. I don't know how many of you have heard this statistic that globally, 39% of global greenhouse gas emissions can be attributed to buildings. That's huge, right? That's a huge portion of global greenhouse gas emissions. And as the world's largest commercial real estate services company, if we can help influence all of our clients, right, all of these owners and occupiers of commercial real estate, we can actually make an impact. We can actually help reduce global greenhouse gas emissions, right? This is not just an exaggeration, right? This is reality for us. And because we have that type of scale, it's amazing, right? And so just last month, CBRE made a commitment to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions, as well as support our clients reducing their greenhouse gas emissions, right? So that's something that we can really do as a result of the global scale of this company. But again, a lot of the things that we focus on might be more relevant in some countries than others. One example of that might be, things related to sustainable procurement. For example, there is a law in the United Kingdom, there's a similar one now in Australia, asking companies to really take action with regards to modern slavery, and to make public statements with regard to their actions related to modern slavery. So that has to do with looking into your supply chain and making sure that your suppliers are doing business in an ethical and responsible way. And if they're not, right, or if you see opportunities to make improvements, it's your obligation, it's your responsibility to work to reduce those modern slavery, human rights types of impacts in your supply chain. Again, that maybe is not as prominent in the conversation here in the United States, but it absolutely is in many of our countries around the world. And, we do have a global human rights policy, for example, and we have a global supplier code of conduct where we expect all of our suppliers to be operating in a socially and environmentally responsible manner. And again, with our size and scale, we really can help influence some of those issues. You mentioned the Global Compact. So CBRE became a signatory of the United Nations Global Compact in 2007. It's the world's largest organization, advocating for corporate sustainability initiatives, right? And so we use that global size and scale, and we align ourselves with other global companies who are saying, we care about these issues, and we're going to ensure that we use our business in a responsible way to, minimize negative environmental impacts, to advance efforts related to human rights, to make sure that we have, no corruption within our business, to focus on labor issues, to focus on the people, not only within our business, but also within our supply chains. And again, this is just about doing good business, right? This is not about, being a tree hugger, right? Or being someone who, just really, really, wants to do the right thing, cares about the environment, cares about people. Of course, we care about those things, but these things are, fundamental to doing business well and being successful in the global economy. It's not really an either or at this point.
It really is those benefits of commitment to grow through this strategy, to manage risk through this strategy, to really build reputation, to acquire both clients and personnel. It's really all of those business strategies that are advanced in the ways that you're describing.
Yeah, exactly, 100%. It's all of our stakeholders and understanding what their needs are, and understanding how we can make sure that we're using our business in a way that helps advance issues related to all of our stakeholders.
So, and just one final question, and then I'd open it up to our students. So how did you get where you are? So we were sharing a little bit about kind of career paths, and Could you just kind of tell the story of your own career path and a little bit about your role and how you see that role in this area of work moving forward?
Sure, yeah. So I have a story. Stories, right? I had no idea that this career even existed when I was in college, and yes, I am definitely older than most, if not all of you on this call. I haven't been working for decades and decades. So when I went to college, I actually studied chemical engineering. I liked math and science, and people said, you should be an engineer. And I said, okay, that sounds great. I had no idea what an engineer actually did every day. And engineers are amazing, there's no doubt. But I realized I didn't actually want to be an engineer. So I worked in management consulting, I worked in retail, I worked in marketing. I tried a few different things to try to figure out, what I wanted to be when I grew up, right? And some of those shifts in careers were by choice, and some of them were not by choice. I actually have been laid off 2 different times in my career. And the first time, it was pretty rough. I was not expecting it, but the company was going through a downsizing. I was promoted 1 month and laid off the next, and I didn't know what to do with myself. So I tried all these different things to try to figure out what my next path was. I ended up going back to graduate school. I went to grad school part-time while I was working full-time to get an MBA. Because at that time I'd gotten into marketing and I thought that sounded really interesting. But when I was in grad school, this is now 2007, so 13, almost 14 years ago, goodness gracious, I took a brand new class that was being offered at the time called Managing for Sustainability. It was being offered through the business school. It was an elective. It was brand new, had never been taught before. And I read the course description. I said, oh, that sounds pretty interesting. And oh yeah, I actually have, that night it works for me, that time for the class.
Mhm.
So I signed up for the class and I was like, wow, again, I had no idea that this career even existed. And in 2007, it still was a pretty new career. It wasn't something that a lot of companies had dedicated teams, focused on. And so I decided, this is what I wanted to do. It really aligned with my values, right? I really cared about the environment. I cared about climate change. I'd seen Al Gore's movie, An Inconvenient Truth, right? And that actually really, spoke to me very deeply. And I felt like, oh, I have kind of a technical mind, but I also am getting this business degree. There's a lot of places maybe I could, build this career in corporate responsibility or corporate sustainability. And so I interned. I did a couple of internships while I was finishing up grad school. But then I got out of grad school in 2008. And for those of you who remember 2008, that was during the Great Recession. So for any of you who are graduating during a pandemic, I feel your pain. It took me a while to find my first full-time job in this space. It actually took me a whole year and a half after I got out of grad school to find my first full-time job working in a company doing this type of work. And that was actually at my previous company. They hired me and I was there for 5 years. I've now been at this company for 6 years. And that's a really long story. So I appreciate y'all hanging in there through that. But I think the point of it is, right, I had no idea what the heck I wanted to do when I was coming out of college. And, some days I still am like, maybe want to shift things in a little different direction. I don't know. But I tried a lot of different things. Again, some by choice, some not by choice, right? And I think, all of that to say that you don't have to have it all figured out now. I sure as heck didn't, right? I don't have it figured out yet, right? That's okay. You can't always control what life throws at you, right? If life throws a pandemic or, God forbid, an illness or who knows what, right? You can't control what life throws at you, but you can control how you react to it and what you do, with that information and how you choose to move forward. So I would just say that, whatever, you have an idea of now, if you know exactly what you want to do, that is amazing. That's fantastic. And if you don't know, that's okay too. That's amazing. That's fantastic. You will figure it out. It's all good. So I guess, that's kind of my advice. If you are interested in this particular career path, I will say that, these types of jobs have, certainly exploded over the last decade, even in the last 2 or 3 years. And a lot of that is interest from investors who are, investing in companies like mine, who are saying, wow, we want to make sure that our investment grows over time, right? We want to make money from this investment. And if companies aren't focusing on these issues, then, are they really, doing a great job of managing the company overall? Are they focusing on managing other risks to the company? Because a lot of these issues absolutely could be risks. And so companies are hiring more and more people in these types of positions, not just large global, publicly traded companies, but small to mid-sized companies are also hiring people to focus on some of these issues. Again, partly because of this investor interest. And I think also partly because a lot of these issues really are impacting all of our day-to-day lives, right? Climate change absolutely will continue to be a defining part of the conversation for the next how many decades to come, right? A lot of issues related to diversity and inclusion and equity, right? And racial justice. A lot of those types of things, you think companies would have had their act together, but I tell you, like the activities that have happened in the United States with the murder of George Floyd and a lot of the things that happened in the US over the past several months have really gotten a lot of companies to open their eyes and recognize that there is a lot more that they need to be doing to support their employees and support their communities in these areas. So I think it's just a really exciting field to be in because there are so many different angles that you can be a part of. You can work in any type of industry you want. I will also say too, I never said I'm going to work in commercial real estate. I don't know anything about commercial real estate. That was just, the first company that happened to hire me in this field was a commercial real estate company. And then this company that I'm at now, CBRE, hired me because of the experience I got at my last company. So Jeff, I hope that answers your question a little bit. Hopefully I didn't bore you all with my personal story, but hopefully it gave you a little bit of an idea of kind of how I got to where I'm at.
No, thank you so much for sharing that. That's exactly right. Careers are a marathon, and you really talked about really the journey of that. And it's not always linear. Very often it isn't linear. And one of the things you mentioned is really the role of serendipity. I was really struck by, boy, this class fits my schedule, and then that becomes a life changer, or I never expected I'd be in commercial real estate, but that's the job I got. And once I'm in it, I go, wait a minute, there's a whole lot more here. So those kinds of discoveries and the serendipities are a piece of that. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah,
I'd like to, I have one more question, but I want to hold that off because I could do this all day, but we've got students here. So Patty, if you could facilitate this for students, if you'd like to ask Jennifer a question, please hit the raised hand function that would be on your reactions tab. And then, no, just use the raised hand function. And then Patty will call on you.
Caroline.
So my question for Jennifer is, so say, for example, you hadn't been hired by that first company after your like 1 and a year and a half search, sorry. Do you think you would still be in commercial real estate? Do you think you would have found your path back there, or are you not sure?
It's a really good question. I doubt it, honestly. I really do. I had such a focus on finding kind of a corporate sustainability, again, corporate responsibility, whatever terms you would like to use. I had such a focus on finding that type of job. And I really was focused more on the environmental side of things at the time. I mentioned watching the, Al Gore's and Inconvenient Truth, many, many years ago now. When I was interning in grad school, the first internship I did was at a sustainability consulting company where I helped clients by calculating their carbon footprints, right? And now there are fancy software tools to do that, but I was doing this like old school, right? Excel style. So, and that was the type of work that I wanted to do, right? I wanted to help companies figure out this environmental sustainability side of things. And I didn't care so much about what industry I wanted to be in. And I know some people really, really care. They absolutely want to work for, an organic food company. That's awesome, right? I want to work for a retailer. I want to work for whatever. At the time, I really just wanted to work in this field, and I was going to, kind of cut my teeth in whoever would give me a chance. So the last company that hired, or, the first company that hired me, but my previous position, right, was at a smaller real estate company. It was specifically focused on a very niche part of commercial real estate. It was focused on industrial real estate, so warehouses and distribution centers. When I first got hired there, I didn't really know much or really care much about warehouses and distribution centers. I was like, okay, cool, as long as I can do something on the environmental sustainability side. But then you get into it and you realize what a huge opportunity you have, what a big impact you can have in this industry. And again, really every industry has an opportunity for impact. So I'm not sure if I had been hired by a different company that I would have managed to find my way to real estate. And, who knows? I mean, I could be at this company the rest of my career. I could, switch jobs in, who knows what amount of time. And maybe I will be in real estate and maybe I won't. I think that's, again, all a personal choice. But for me, it's, being in a position where I can really help a company kind of advance these types of initiatives, help understand who they are and what they could and should be doing, and what their biggest opportunities are for impact, and really focusing on those things. So that's what drives me. But again, that might not be what drives you, and that's totally okay too.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I was really excited when I heard you were speaking, because my aunt has worked for CBRE for like, I think 12 years now in the
Nice.
Anaheim office, and she works closely with Honda Center. I know the project.
Oh, very
Honda
cool.
Center. So yeah, I was really excited. Thank you.
Of course, you're welcome.
Grant, do you have your hand up?
Yep. So my question is that over the summer, or at least definitely in 2020, I think a lot of companies have put a lot of focus on corporate responsibility. So my question to you is, what do you guys do to really show your authenticity when you do it? Because I think a lot of kids in our generation, we have a pretty good ability to kind of sniff out if a company's really, doing good things for the world, or just kind of showing off, like with a lot of like performative activism and stuff like that. So what do you guys do just to show your authenticity?
That is an excellent question. Greenwashing is real, right? And companies are, greenwashing, SDG washing, BLM washing, you name the washing, right? Companies are, trying to, say that they care about things, but do they really, right? And so I'll say a couple of things. One, I mentioned earlier that we produce this report each year that talks about all the things we're doing across our environmental and social and governance endeavors. We get that report externally assured. So that means we bring in an independent third-party consultant to review all of the claims, all of the numbers in that report. It's kind of like an audit, basically. They'll make sure that all of the information in that report is accurate. They will then also talk to people within the company that provided that information, people who lead these different teams, right? So the woman who runs our Center for Workplace Safety and Health, Workplace Safety and Wellbeing, and the woman who is our Chief Compliance Officer. And they'll talk to these people and they'll say, they'll dig into their programs and understand what they're actually doing, day to day. And then they'll look back at that report and say, okay, does this report actually reflect what we learned in these conversations with these people? And also, is this data accurate? Is this information that they're publishing accurate? And many companies don't actually go to that extra effort. And it is an effort, right? We have to pay for it, right? We have to hire an independent consultant to, provide this opinion. But we do this process. We've done it for the last 2 years. We'll continue to do it going forward, because we want people to have confidence and believe that the claims that we're making are accurate, that the things that we're saying we're doing, we really are doing. But we've been doing this report now for 13 years. We've only gotten that external assurance for the last 2 years, right? It took a while to convince the company, no, we really do need to do this, right? People aren't going to believe it just because, we have this fancy, document, right? This, beautiful PDF, right? So that's one thing that we do, again, to make sure that it's not just Jennifer saying, look what a great company we are, but that the information that we're putting out publicly really is true and accurate and independently verified. So that's one thing I'll say. The other thing I'll say is that, the company, our company, I would say historically has been very hesitant to be involved in activism in a lot of ways. We haven't really stuck our neck out and kind of, played in that space because, we've typically been a pretty conservative company. Commercial real estate has been a pretty conservative industry, and, we've been around for more than 100 years. But, there are things that are happening, in the world that at this point, we can't sit back and kind of, sit on the sidelines and ignore. After the murder of George Floyd, we issued a statement denouncing racism, like, probably almost every other company, right? But it wasn't just, we're going to put out a statement, right? It's like, okay, what are we actually going to do about that? And of course, we had a diversity and inclusion team at that time. We had employee network groups to support employees from various populations. But the company recognized they needed to step up and do more. So they promoted one of our senior most Black executives to be our Chief Diversity Officer. And they have given, and you know, he's reporting directly now to the CEO in that position. So it's not something that kind of falls under human resources or is a part of something else, right? You know, he is in a very senior position. He reports directly to the CEO. He has the resources that he needs to do his job. So he's been building his team to really help the company do more in this space, right? In terms of our philanthropic efforts, we made donations to the National Urban League and to the NAACP Legal and Educational Defense Fund. And also we invited our employees to make donations to those organizations, and we matched those employee donations because we recognize that, you know, we've been doing charitable activities, but this was not an area that we had been historically supporting, and that obviously was a miss for us. So we stepped up our efforts in that area. We made a very public statement about a new goal a couple of months ago, where we have committed to, you know, spending in terms of supplier diversity. All the money that we spend to run our own company and to provide all these services to all of our clients, we've made a commitment to spend $1 billion this year in 2021 with diverse suppliers and raise that to $3 billion over the next 5 years. And these are very public commitments that we've made. Obviously, we will be tracking that information and we'll be reporting publicly on the results of that so that we expect to be held accountable for those types of things. So again, it's not just that we say, you know, Black Lives Matter. Yes, Black Lives Matter. Of course they matter. Of course we're going to say that, right? And also we're going to start to put our money and our actions where our mouth is. So hopefully, you know, again, but we're not perfect. No company's perfect. No human is perfect, right? I'm sure that we will make missteps. But between, you know, getting our report independently verified to give confidence to readers in that data, as well as, again, not just making claims, but really trying to back them up with action. You know, those are the types of things that I would look for if I was looking to a company and saying, you know, are they actually doing these things? Or are they just talking about it?
Yeah, that's awesome. That all sounds really sweet. Thank you very much.
Yeah, of course. Thank you.
Matthew, you have your hand up?
Yeah, first, I want to say thank you so much for your time today. It's been amazing hearing from you. But my question is kind of like, what differentiates CBRE over some of the other like really large like companies such as like Newmark or JLL or Cushman in regards to kind of like your corporate responsibility practices? I don't know, kind of piggybacks off of Grant's question, but you definitely mentioned like charitable giving, like your acronym RISE, and then a third-party consultants. But if you can mention a couple others, that'd be interesting to hear.
Yeah, of course. And clearly, you know, the industries because you named all the major players in our industry. So yes, I could tell that you are somebody who is very knowledgeable about this space. I would say that in terms of those other companies, and those are all great companies. I know people that work at every one of those companies, and they, you know, have, I would say, you know, the people that I know are fantastic. And I think those are all companies who are, you know, moving down this path as well. I think that one of the things that sets us apart is, again, our size and our scale and our opportunity. Again, you know, this, you know, of the companies you mentioned, JLL is a similar size to us. We got them beat a little bit in terms of, you know, employees and geographies and those types of things and revenue. But our size and scale really means that we can make a huge impact, right? And if we have a client that is working in how many different locations around the world, we can provide consistency and services to them in all of these regions around the world. They know when they work with CBRE, they know what they're going to get. You know, of the companies that you mentioned, both ourselves and JLL have set a science-based target for our greenhouse gas emissions reduction. I'm not sure if that's a term you're familiar with, but companies for many years now have been setting goals to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions, and that's great. But historically, companies would say, we think we can reduce our emissions 10% in the next 5 years, right? They'll just pick a number that they think is achievable. They'll put it out there. Everybody be like, oh, that's great. That's fantastic, right? The thing that companies really have been doing, again, for accountability's sake over the last just handful of years has been setting what's called a science-based target. And that means it's actually grounded in science. It's grounded in what is needed by companies around the world in order to achieve the ambitions of the Paris Climate Agreement, right? To hold global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels. So it's not just us saying, we're going to set a goal, and this is going to be our goal. It's us saying, given the type of company that we are, given where we operate around the world, given our expected trajectory of growth, this is how ambitious we need to be in terms of our goal setting in order to do our part to keep global warming, you know, on a reasonable scale. And so both ourselves and JLL have set that type of goal and have actually submitted it to this group of nonprofits called the Science-Based Targets Initiative to have it reviewed. And they look at all of our numbers, they crunch our numbers too, they ask us questions, they challenge us to make sure that that level of ambition is real. So I would say, both ourselves and JLL have gone through that process and gotten our target verified and approved. So I would say that, we're definitely serious about these types of issues. For me, of course, I think it also comes back, of course, to CBRE's culture. You obviously referenced the RISE values that I had mentioned, but that really does kind of permeate everything that we do. So I think our size and our scale, our culture, our willingness to be transparent and be held accountable for what we do are some of the things that really help us help differentiate us in the marketplace.
Thank you so much.
Sure. Thank you for the question.
Any other questions? We have no hands up now, Jeff.
Okay, thank you, Patty. So
Holding it up. Oh, sorry.
go ahead, please.
Yeah, I was gonna ask from Jennifer, how do you incentivize, let's say for those real estate with smaller buildings to incentivize in environmentally sustainable parts or saving energy? So like say they have a small building, like a 2-story building, and they get their rent from, those renters, but then there's no real incentive for solar. Is there, like, how else could they do it, like, to be environmentally sustainable? Like, it probably could lower the rent for them every month, but then it's still high cost for them for solar energy to build solar panels on a building.
Yeah, that's a great question, because depending on the type of client, right, there are a lot of different things that could make sense for them and maybe other things that wouldn't make sense for them. So I would say that, certainly energy efficiency is always a good place to start. You would think that at this point that companies are using efficient, light bulbs, right? And that they have automatic sensors to turn off lights when people aren't in the room. And they've got, building automation systems that, kick the heat on or the air conditioning on in the morning when people come in and, change the set points of the temperature at the end of the day. And they don't run the heating and air conditioning on full blast over the weekends, and that their building is insulated properly, right? A lot of those types of things that you think are common sense, right? But they're really not always common sense. And so just by going through and just doing an audit and understanding kind of where their sources of energy are coming from and what types of measures could be put into place to reduce those sources of energy and make the building more efficient is always a great place to start. Renewables are certainly an option in a lot of different ways, but again, depending on the type of building, it might make sense to do on-site renewables. It might not make sense to do on-site renewables. You definitely run the numbers on that. So it's not a given that always makes sense, but it is an option. So that's another thing for companies to look at. I think that, you mentioned, if this is the building owner and they've got tenants in there, do the tenants care about these types of things, right? Is this something that the tenants are actually pushing for and would be, supportive of different improvements to the building? And maybe the cost of the energy for the building is reduced through some of these efficiency measures, but the landlord maybe doesn't decrease the rent to the tenants and instead invest those savings in more efficiency or renewables or other types of measures. So I think that's just a long way of saying, I think there are a lot of different things for companies to look at and for property owners to look at, depending on the type of property, where it's getting its energy from, in terms of both the utility company itself as well as what's consuming the energy within the building. But of course, we've got people that can help with all of that type of analysis and assessment if that's something that clients are interested in.
Well, in this case, the one that I'm talking about is a mixed building, both people who are living in the building and also those who are working on it. And 2 of them happen to be dental offices. So there are high amounts for the dental ones, especially with the drills and the washing. So there's a high fixed cost there, both electric and water.
Understood. Yeah, absolutely.
But then there's also the issues as of right now, there's a bunch of darn homeless people invading that said property, wasting the water. And sorry, they've been investing a lot in security because of a lot of things, so they can't exactly do as much energy right now. But yeah, that's also another issue for another thing.
Yeah,
Thank
it
you.
sounds like a building owner that has a lot of challenges, as many building owners do. So I definitely wish them all the best with their challenges.
Yeah,
Thank you.
this one is located in LA,
That's
near
okay.
in Los Feliz, but yeah, that's
okay.
another thing.
Thank you. Okay.
Thank you. We
Theo?
have a hand up for Theo. We have time for another one.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, so would you, CBRE is like you said, like an international corporation handling real estate, but would you say that the Los Angeles branch or the Southern California branches are at the forefront of kind of implementing like sustainable practices and stuff into your guys' business? Like, is it your branch that is like really setting the model and standards for the rest of CBRE around the world, or like what branches are really leading in that respect?
Yeah, I would actually say that our operations in the UK and the United Kingdom are far ahead of where we are here in the US and in other regions of the world. And part of that is due to regulations, right? Businesses there face, carbon taxes, for example, right? We don't have carbon taxes here in the US. And so, regulations are pushing them in a certain direction. Investors in that part of the world also have been paying more attention to ESG issues for a longer period of time. And our clients in that area are definitely pushing us to do more, do more than our clients here in the US, for example. So, I would say that in terms of the environmental initiatives, certainly our teams in the United Kingdom definitely have an advantage and a leg up over our teams in other regions of the world. That's also a benefit of being a global company, right? Is that we can share those ideas and best practices across the business, right? We, literally at 8:30 this morning, I was on a call with some of my colleagues in London, right? I'll be on a call with colleagues in Australia later in the day, and I talk to people everywhere else in between. And so it's an amazing opportunity to engage with colleagues to share ideas and best practices to help us understand how CBRE, if we're a leader in one area, can we be a leader in that area everywhere, right? And that's definitely part of the beauty of working for a global company like ours.
Thank you. Any other questions? Well, let me just thank you so much, Jennifer, for taking the time this afternoon. I do want to make one quick statement for our students, and this is doing a favor for Jennifer and for me. You notice that our names have an EI or an IE in the last name. That's a German origin name, and the trick is always pronounce the second vowel. Always pronounce the second vowel. So I have been called Thies more often than you'd want to know, and it's Thies. So
And
just
I've been
do us a
called
favor.
Leitch, and I'm not a leach. Like, I really don't think of myself as a leech. So
Exactly. Please do us that favor. So Jennifer, thank you so much for sharing. And not just your own personal and professional experience and journey, but really the role of corporate responsibility. And you really highlighted how it functions professionally, but also how it functions within an organization, and especially within a global corporation. And what you talked about is just the aspiration of impact really tied into strategy, which always has tactics and deliverables which need to be audited and then reported upon. That whole process really fundamentally of transparency about that enables not just the organization to organize itself around those things, but also the investing class and broader stakeholders to be able to see the authenticity of that. And so thank you so very much for sharing that. It's been just an absolute honor and pleasure to have the opportunity for this dialogue with you today.
yeah, of course. Thank you so much, Jeff. And thank you very much for all of you for tuning in, for all of your great questions and your interest. And yeah, I certainly wish you all the best. If anyone wants to connect with me on LinkedIn, I would be happy to accept your LinkedIn connection request as well.